All right. I hope everybody can hear me. I'm a little late doing a podcast today because well, we had a power outage and transformer, I guess, blew up. Not really sure what caused it, but nothing lasts forever. Anyway, I'm going to be doing this video, which is a short video, and I'm going to edit it with the video screen down here so you guys can see what I'm working on. And we are currently working on Windows. In case you're asking yourself, what is Windows? Windows is a Linux alternative to Microsoft Windows. Something I began working on when I noticed the Microsoft partner with security company, I can't recall their name offhand, that crashed all the airports. Let me go ahead and check that real quick. I'm going to check it on the Freebook web. We have our own search engine now. CrowdStrike, that was the name of it. I do apologize. CrowdStrike is a partner of Microsoft, and when a security update was released by Microsoft to aid CrowdStrike, Microsoft did not fully test that update. And because of that failed testing of the update, it had many bugs which killed every enterprise computer found in the airports and various other places. Federal government systems also crashed. Several industry computer systems crashed as a result of it. And that's the common denominator with Microsoft operating systems, is they have the crappiest security. And I began working on Windows. Now, a lot of people look at Linux like, oh man, I gotta learn code, or I gotta learn something advanced, and I'm not tech savvy, so I don't want to use it. Which a lot of people think that about Linux, but it's really not that complicating. It used to be back in the 90s when Red Hat 5.0 desktop was still around, and you had to compile everything from source in order to install it. And believe it or not, now we have our own app store. Have our own it looks and acts a lot like Microsoft Windows. The logo for where Windows would be has an L for Windows. The desktop wallpaper says Windows is back. And it shares absolutely no code with Microsoft. And it's an updated software that updates regularly. It's free and open source, and Linux is a hell of a lot more secure than Microsoft is. And I built it over Ubuntu Cinnamon. And it is re-engineered from the ground up to look identical to Microsoft Windows 10. I'm also working on a version that looks identical to Windows 11 and another version that looks identical to Windows 7. I'm also working on a Windows 8 version. And instead of calling it Windows, to avoid any kind of copyright infringement, it will be called Windows 8. Windows 7, Windows with an L, Windows 10, Windows 11. And as Microsoft continues to build Microsoft Windows, the upcoming updates, which they call Windows 12, you'll have to pay by the month subscription in order to use their software. And most people are going to do one of two things when this happens. And I predict that this will kill Microsoft. Because the only people that are going to be paying that ridiculous licensing fee is probably enterprise and businesses. Private companies like mine are obviously switching to our own proprietary Windows system, but most users are going to either learn Linux because they don't want to waste the money on Microsoft, or they're going to go to Apple. A lot of people have already switched to Apple because Windows 10 is crap. Windows 11 is crap. Windows 8.1 was okay, But whenever Microsoft started forcing updates on Windows and not giving the user the option to opt out of updates, which I always opted out of them because I know how insecure, as the airports have proven. There it is. So Microsoft is very insecure, and that is why Windows is taking over. And I'm not charging any licensing fees. I'm giving this software away for free. You can go on mylindows.com and download our beta copy. Now, there was a software that was released in, I believe, Brazil not that long ago called Linux FX, which no longer exists. I acquired the company, I acquired all their software, and they had built a Linux software that looks identical to Windows 10, and that's what we based Windows on. And Linux FX is, in fact, they call it Windows Ubuntu now, is what they changed their name to, and they took on more of a modern Windows 11 theme style, and they charge a licensing fee. And we're not charging anything for Windows, so we took the Linux FX software after acquiring their old source codes, which they don't use anymore, and I set up a free server, set up our own repository, but the software is built on Ubuntu Cinnamon is their source code. Now, Linux FX, before I got a hold of it, was originally powered by Ubuntu, and it used the Ubuntu repository and the Ubuntu source codes. We are completely re-engineering the whole thing from the ground up to not even look for Ubuntu. It looks for Linux FX. And sorry, Windows. It looks for Windows. Linux FX is the code name. We went ahead and kept the code name for the hell of it, right? So there it is. Linux FX is now Windows. Now, anybody who doesn't know the history of Windows, Windows was started back in, I'd like to say 1994. It was a Linux-based operating system originally based on the Xandros operating system, which was a Linux software back in the day. And they were sued by Microsoft, and Microsoft acquired Windows and then shut it down. And then the company that previously started Windows transferred the name to Linspire, which today is still in existence, I believe. Yep, it is still in existence today, and it doesn't look anything like Windows. But back in the day, man, they were competing. They had it looking so identical to Windows 98 that Microsoft got mad. Even though Microsoft lost the lawsuit, Linspire countersued, and Microsoft had to pay them a ton of money because they sued a company over open source software, which legally you can't sue open source software. Open source software is open source. It's open source because it's free. You can edit it, modify it, copy it, distribute it, do whatever you want to with it. It's open source code. There's no copyright attached to open source. It's literally free. You can do whatever you want with it. You can modify it, change it, tweak it, do whatever you want. That's why open source software is so powerful. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but Linux has a history. Most web servers run Linux. My servers run Red Hat Enterprise. And we use the Webuzo control panel, which acts and looks identical to cPanel, but it's a hell of a lot cheaper. And we run Linux. And now that we built our own Windows clone, we're running Linux all the way up. And people don't know it, but Google has been distributing laptops that run Linux, called the Chromebook. Chrome OS is a Linux-based operating system that Google develops specifically for Chromebooks and webbooks and netbooks. And believe it or not, your Roku TV has a Linux base. Your smartphone, if you own an Android phone. Now, any phone out there that is not an Apple is an Android system. There's only two smartphone operating systems that are out in the market today. BlackBerry really doesn't exist anymore, so I'm not going to include them. But Apple runs Apple. Apple has always been on their own, proprietary. They've been Apple. They're Apple. Apple's Apple. I love Apple, don't get me wrong. Great for video editing. But Android, Apple was released 4 years prior to Android. And Android is a Linux-based system. So whether you know it, believe it or not, you're running Linux on your daily lives. Simply because When you go to the ATM, ATM runs Linux. Smartphones run Linux. Roku TVs, Linux. Linux runs on a lot of stuff, guys. It runs on damn near everything that you exist around. The only thing it really doesn't exist in is desktop computers and laptops, unless you're running a Chromebook. So believe it or not, you are running Linux. And that is why Linux is going to be mainstream when Microsoft's new bill by the month subscription for Windows 12 is going to fail, because nobody's going to pay that. They're going to go elsewhere for their software because nobody wants to waste money. And especially in this economy, we're barely getting by just as it is. Americans are struggling, guys. So that being said, I gotta say, this is a glorious system I built, because it looks and acts identical to Microsoft Windows 10. It does not share any Microsoft code, and it is beautiful. So this video is going to end, and I'm going to move into phase 2, which is going to be the demonstration of this system. We're going to use Linux FX, aka Windows 10, and we're going to show you the Freebook network as it exists on the internet while we're using our own operating system. Stay tuned, guys.